Welcome to Tales from Flat Space, a podcast of science fiction and fantasy by yours truly, Gina A. Pond. Just know that the stories in this podcast may contain content that could be disturbing to some listeners. Listener discretion is advised. So this is Colony, Part 1, New York Colony, Chapter 5, Jenny. Inhale 1, exhale 2, inhale 3. I sat on the floor in lotus position, with my back against the wall furthest from the door, counting my breaths. It'd been a long time since I actually had to count them in meditation. My mind was all over the place, and the stillness that I thought I had so carefully crafted felt as fragile as an egg. The image of my mother and an unknown little boy, disappearing in a flash of light, refused to stay out of my head. Then came anger. Anger at Lulu, the AIs, my father, everyone. I tried to let it all go, but my mind wasn't obeying me. I kept trying anyway, just trying to calm myself down. It wasn't working. After another few minutes, I gave up, unfolded myself from lotus position, and just sat staring at the door. I closed my eyes, leaned my head back against the wall. Are you letting go of your anger, or just pushing it away? A voice inside my head asked. I blinked. The voice reminded me of when the Black Mother talked to me on New Harmony, but I knew it was someone different. I'm letting it go, I stubbornly answered. If you don't acknowledge your anger and accept that it is part of you, or if you stay attached to your anger, it will rule you and your actions, the voice replied. Frustrated, I stood up and paced. Who are you to tell me to acknowledge my anger? Huh? What do you know? I thought at the voice. I know wrath. It is a part of me, and a part of you. You can use this emotion, or you can let it continue to harm you. Did you think compassion was only for others? I stopped pacing. I killed, I said out loud. What was the greater compassion? Would keeping the New Harmonists in power have been a compassionate act? I didn't know. All I remembered about what I did at New Harmony was that I wanted revenge for Mark's death. But then I remembered what the Black Mother said before I went to the council building. You will be my instrument to break the chains that bind me here. That memory had been so deeply buried in my mind. I sat on the bed, stunned. Compassion isn't always nice, the voice said. Who are you? I asked. There was a chuckle. You should have talked to Marcia a bit more. What does that mean? I asked, but the voice didn't answer again. Why am I talking to a voice in my head, I thought. And again, isn't that what I did with the Black Mother? Wasn't that what Marcia meant about talking to spirits? I went back to pacing again, thinking about what the voice had said. A double knock interrupted my thoughts. I turned towards the door. Hey, Jenny, said Lulu through the door. Breakfast is here. Okay, I'll be out in a minute, I said. One question came to me. Don't you have to have love to have compassion, I asked. Love and compassion are two different things, said the voice. Joseph came back as I sat down to breakfast. Our morning visitor has, he looked at his wristcom, by now left the planet. Let me guess, Sector again? Lulu nodded as she stuck her finger in all the dishes. Joseph ignored it. What in the world are you doing, Lulu? I asked. She looked at me pointedly and said, Now, Jenny, you know I detest that nickname. But as to what I'm doing, I'm testing the food for poison. By sticking your finger in all the dishes, I hope you washed your hands. Useful enhancement, Jenny, believe me. And yes, I did, she replied, licking her finger. Clean, let's eat. I served myself some eggs and bacon and fruit, while Lulu went after the crepes with gusto, plopping nearly the whole bowl full of thick cream on top. She downed her nutrition shake in 2 goes, then piled bacon and eggs next to her crepes. I bowed to my plate and began to eat, too, while Joseph ignored us and checked his tablet. I ate silently, lost in my thoughts about what the voice had said. If it wasn't the Black Mother, then who was it? You just spent a whole year learning Buddhism, silly, I thought. Could it really be the Buddha? Or was I just talking to some part of my own mind that heard the teachings and is now processing them? Does it matter from where the wisdom comes? Said the voice. I suppose not, I thought back at it. I'll call you Buddha anyway, since it's better than the voice, and it makes me feel a little less crazy. The Buddha chuckled, but said nothing more. So, what's on the schedule today, Joseph? Asked Lulu. Joseph put down his fork and picked up his tablet again. Well, for lunch, I've booked us at the Genève Chocolatier for the afternoon tea. You can't get any better chocolate sundaes than that. This afternoon, we come back here to move to the penthouse suite, and tonight is Fight Club. Oh, really? I totally forgot, said Lulu, getting a furrow look on her face. Hector will be there, yes? More than likely, Anna, said Joseph. Fight Club? I asked. Lulu lit up. Yes, some years back, one of the elites here watched an ancient Earth film about some guy who went to this secret fight club where guys beat the shit out of each other. He tried to get some of the other elite guys into it, but none of them wanted to get dirty. So they decided to hire folks to fight for them, and of course they bet on them. It's been quite the thing, and Hector has some of the best fighters working for him. She grinned. Instead of going out today, let's stay here. Move rooms, then head to Fight Club in full glorious fashion. I had a feeling where this was going. I won't fight for you, I said firmly. Lulu waved it off. You won't have to. Hector thinks I'm dead. Just seeing his face when I walk into my usual box will be good enough. Although we might have some trouble afterwards. Oh, please, Anna, you draw trouble like a moth to a flame, Joseph said. Well, yes, but this will be the useful kind of trouble. Will you need me for this? He asked. Lulu looked at me and I just shrugged. No, darling, go enjoy your conquest. He stuck his tongue at her like a little kid. Lulu laughed. Don't stick it out unless you intend to use it, she said. What are you, 12? I said, and they both laughed. We finished up breakfast and went to pack up our stuff. Since I didn't have much to pack, even with the new uniforms, I sat and watched Lulu pack up her clothes. Just out of curiosity, I asked, how old are you? She folded a shirt and put it in one of the many suitcases on the bed. A magician never tells their secrets, but let's just say that I'm old enough to be your mother. Possibly even your grandmother if you were raised in Survey. Smiling, she picked up a short leather skirt. And before you say it, yes, I know I don't look that old. I was given a subsentient enhancements as a kid, and those few of us that get the full slate of enhancements tend to be very well preserved. I frowned. You've been doing this since you were a kid? We identified the neurodivergent early in Survey. About 300 or 400 years ago or so, a woman who was a narcissist became a captain. She manipulated the AI into doing some dangerous experiments and ultimately killed her whole crew and one of the founders of Survey in a murder-suicide. Ever since then, children in Survey are assessed very carefully through childhood and early adulthood for any kind of neurodivergence. They try to put us in a position where our particular type of neurodivergence can do the most good. When my sociopathy really started to develop, around when I was 8, they sent me to Sun Tzu. Now, I use my special brand of crazy to make sure that Sun Tzu can get the best information I can find for him. And most of the time I can get my sociopathic jollies doing it. What's the trade-off? I asked. I gazed curiously at the woman in front of me, who continued nonchalantly folding and sorting her clothing. The trade-off is that sometimes I get lost in my legends and need help getting out of them, although that hasn't happened in a long time. I have to eat like a fucking horse most of the time, even more so when I exert myself. The nanobots need a lot of fuel to keep my body in good shape. Hypoglycemia could be a problem if I get captured, beaten, or lost. She looked at me. I suppose this is stuff I should let you know. Okay, we went over the hypoglycemia. I also can get dehydrated relatively easily. I don't get really drunk, no matter how much I drink, which was how I knew Marcia was drinking the night she went out with me on Hades. Small wounds will heal really fast. Larger wounds will stabilize quickly. Major trauma will still kill me, especially if I can't get to a survey doctor in time. The bots can only do so much. Lulu sat on the bed, holding a pair of pants, as she thought for a second. I tend to try and not get myself into situations where I'd end up dead if I can help it. That's partly why I'm glad you agreed to work with me. I think we're getting close to some answers, hence the fact that I have a poison detector in my finger. But I actually could use a bodyguard. Although, with the bots, most poisons are useless on me. I've been the bane of Hector Kozalezzi's existence because of that. Fucking amateur, so unimaginative. She shook her head, then stood up and started packing again. Yes, that's all good things to know. Should I stash candy in my gi? Might not be a bad idea, I suppose. I do keep a stash in my purse. Lulu closed the suitcase with some difficulty, then pulled out a couple of garment bags from the closet and put them on top. Joseph! She yelled. I began to think she yelled for him just to annoy him. Yes, darling, he said with annoyance. Is our new room ready? I'm calling down now, Anna. Don't forget the luggage rack. Already ordered. She turned to me. He's so good at that. And did you hear that? He seems a bit more chipper this morning. Must have been some pretty good sex with your landlord. What? Oh, yeah, apparently he picked up your landlord as well as your luggage. I put my hand to my face as Lulu fussed around the suite, making sure she had all of her things. I was beginning to think that Lulu coming after me was no accident. I mean, I already knew about what happened to my family now. I didn't need to stay, but I couldn't just leave knowing she was on this mission to find out how my father was getting this information, especially since I still didn't know how he found out where I was and who I was now. But it's been over 10 years. If he knew what I had done and where I was, why didn't he send someone after me? It should have been impossible. I know I covered my tracks, and Survey had been scrubbing my records too, I thought. Then it hit me. He did send someone. He must have been the one to give the new harmonist the information to blackmail me. I felt the blood drain from my face. Oh no, I can't leave now. Hey, Jenny, the luggage rack is here, Lulu said, coming into the bedroom. She stopped when she saw me. What's wrong, Jenny? I think my father knows about me, Anna. I think he might have been the one that gave the new harmonist the information to blackmail me. Lulu put her finger to her lips. Let's talk about that later, okay? She said quietly. Can you help me get the suitcases out of here? She said louder. Yeah, sure, I said. Chapter 6. Lulu. The fight club was packed, as it usually was. It smelled of beer and sweat and blood, and I loved it. But then again, I love watching a good fight, and I loved being seen, and Fight Club was a great place to do both. And I made sure I was definitely seen. Tonight I wore my leathers, and when we walked into the main hall, every eye was on me. I smiled, brandishing the riding crop that was a gift from Olka. Most people turned away when I did that, but there were a few who looked a bit longingly at it. A riding crop? Really? Asked Jenny. It makes a good fidget toy. Plus, it goes with the outfit. And it might be needed later, Jenny noted. Well, yes, that too. The doorman gave me my box key, and we went up to the mezzanine. My box, of course, was directly across from Hector's. I couldn't say that I didn't bait him a little, since he was such a whiny little bitch. Part of me really wanted to take him over my knee, but unfortunately he didn't run with that crowd. I unlocked the door, and Jenny went in first, looked around, and then motioned for me to enter. I went straight for the open front of the box, leaning on the railing, giving my most dazzling smile. Hector was talking to someone in his box and didn't see me until someone else pointed me out to him. He turned towards me, and his eyes opened wide. I gave him a little wave, blew him a kiss, then turned my back on him. Sitting down, I scanned the betting tablet. Damn, looks like Hector's trying to kill the competition tonight, I said. He's got a lot of new folks on the docket. Peter, a.k.a. the president of Pain, is currently champion. Well, current is relative. He hasn't been beaten in 2 years. Oh? Said Jenny. Yeah, he's an asshole. He doesn't just fight people, he breaks people. Not very sporting of him. I sighed. I was hoping to take this place down, but the information here is too good. How do they recruit the fighters? Asked Jenny, a little too casually. I looked at her for a moment, then said, Well, theoretically, it's only people who really want to fight, and the deal is that their medical expenses are paid. If there's permanent damage, they're supposed to get a credit account to pay for their care for life. They're also supposed to get a big payout per fight that's not based on how well they do, but the rumors are that Hector isn't playing by those rules. Peter gets paid, and I think the others get much less for letting that asshole beat the shit out of him. I looked at the list of fighters, then sorted it by sponsors. Most of them were Hector's fighters. One name, though, caught my eye. No fucking way. What? Bumblebee's on the list of fighters again. The last time she was here, Peter nearly beat her to a pulp. It's only been a couple of weeks. There's no way she'd be patched up enough to fight again. Come on. I got up, and Jenny followed me down to the pits. All the fighters were warming up in cubicles in the order of their appearance, with Peter getting the champion's cubby. We walked past him down to the end of the row where Heather was stretching gingerly, her face still heavily bruised from the previous fight. Even I could see she wouldn't last in her shape. I looked at Jenny, who shook her head, her face turning to stone. Heather? I said. The fighter looked up. Yeah, Yermaev, what do you want? Why are you back in the ring this week? You can't be anywhere near well enough after the last time I saw you in here. And why the fuck do you care? None of you elites give a shit about us as long as we perform. She went back to stretching. I care because Hector is an asshole and treats people like shit, I said. How'd he get you back here tonight? She wouldn't look at me. I walked over to the fighter and said in my best top voice, Tell me, Heather. That got her to look at me. There was slight fear in her eyes, which told me a lot more than whatever else she was about to say. Listen, I gotta make rent this month, and he said he wouldn't pay me if I didn't fight. He wants me to throw the fight, but you know how Peter is. Did the asshole pay your medical? She averted her eyes. I was about to say that she wasn't fighting, no matter what, but then Jenny walked forward. You are not fighting, Heather, Jenny said. But, Heather said, looking at me, then back to Jenny. Jenny shook her head, then looked at me. Can we get her off planet, maybe to our friends? Heather was a good fighter and had a lot of good attitude. What do you think, Uncle Mushi or Uncle Sonny? Jenny thought for a moment. Is the order here based on skill? I nodded. Yeah, and she'll probably be the last. The Bumblebee is excellent. Uncle Mushi, then, with the option to go to Uncle Sonny. She unbuckled her sword belt and handed the katana and her kimono jacket to me. Take care of those, would you? I took it, but pulled her over to the side. Are you sure about this, Jenny? Yes. I don't condone slavery, even paid slavery. Jenny's face was remote. Besides, this Hector has made me angry twice in one day. I don't know about you, but I'm kind of over it. And if Peter is as you say, it'll be the right thing to do for the others to incapacitate him. You just arrange things for me with whoever is the organizer. She paused, looking at Heather. She was terrified when she talked to you about Hector. She whispered to me, "There's more going on here than just her rent payment." I raised an eyebrow, as Jenny's voice sounded much more dangerous. All right, I agree with you. Non-consensual slavery is wrong and usually ends in a lot of bad things. I looked at Heather. Don't make it quick, though. The bastard doesn't deserve it. Jenny gave me a rather frightening grin, then walked back over to Heather. Go with Anna now. She'll explain things to you. See you in the ring, I said with a smile, then gently grabbed Heather by the arm and steered her towards the exit. I went up to the security guard. Where's the pit boss? He pointed at the caged ring to a small man with a balding head. I marched us over to him. You the pit boss? Yeah, what of it? He looked past me to Heather. Why is she out here? I'm putting my girl in for her. You finally have a fighter? Is she as good? Better. The man looked at me. Wait here. He went to the warm-up area. I waited patiently, knowing what the idiot's reaction was going to be. After a few minutes, he came back out. I gave him a cold smile. You sure about her? She doesn't look like much. In fact, she was sitting in the middle of the warm-up mat with her eyes closed. Oh, I'm sure. I want to put all my cash on her. He perked up at that. Really? How much is that? $50K, I said. Heather's eyes looked like they were going to pop out of her head. I turned to her. Oh, honey, if you have personal gear you need, why don't you go and get it? Heather nodded and left me with the pit boss. Well, why don't I give you 2,000 to 1? You got your chit? I smiled sweetly to him and handed him the betting chit. He marked it on his tablet. What's her name? Jenny. Her fighting name? He asked, annoyed. I thought for a moment. Then inspiration struck. Vengeance. He blinked, coughed, then said, Right. See you after the fight. The man looked smug. I resisted the urge to laugh in his face. Heather came back out carrying a large gym bag. I took her arm in mine. Well, come on, Heather. Let's go back to the box and get some snacks. I wonder if they have popcorn tonight. Okay, she said, sounding dazed. I did laugh then. This was going to be an excellent night. The early matches weren't that exciting. They were all new fighters just trying to get ranked. Only about half of the usual audience were in their seats, and it would only get full when the president's matches came up. I took that time to order up a slew of snacks for me and Heather, including an extra-large bucket of popcorn. The wait staff had to bring in some extra tray tables to hold it all. I also took the time to send a couple of messages on my tablet. I knew I wouldn't get answers right away, but at the very least we could get Heather off planet and away from Hector. I was also hoping, with Jenny in the ring, I might kill a few birds with one very angry stone. So, Heather, I said, after the wait staff left. Heather jumped, her attention pulled sharply away from the door. I've arranged it so you'll be getting survey citizenship. You what now? Come again? She asked in disbelief. I smiled. Yes, survey citizenship. We'll give you enough cash to get on the next shuttle to New York Station, where my friend Ebo will meet you and escort you to the nearest survey ship. I took a sip of a very nice martini. You'll stay with us tonight, and we'll have you on the shuttle tomorrow afternoon. Is there anything in particular you need from your apartment? Are you shitting me? Survey? I thought you couldn't get into survey anymore after what happened at Unity Hub and all. Well, let's just say I have connections. Heather studied me for a moment, then looked away, thoughtful. She turned back to me after a moment with her eyes wide. Holy shit, you're survey, folks. You're quick. Maybe I should send you to Uncle Sonny after all. I looked her in the eyes. But you'll keep that to yourself until we leave here, do you understand? She gulped and nodded at my tone. No problem, she replied. Good, have some snacks. It's time for the show. I leaned forward as the MC came out into the ring, and I grabbed an eclair from one of the tray tables. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen and other folks. It's time for the main event. Tonight promises to be a great night. But first, let's bring out our champion for 2 years running. I give you the President of Pain. The crowd roared, with some shouting, President, President. Peter ran out into the ring, holding up his arms and waving to the crowd. He was a wide and tall man with a bald head and many tattoos, wearing only a pair of tight pants. I knew he loved the attention almost as much as he loved beating people up. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Heather make a face of disgust. I smiled. She had no idea what was coming. The MC raised his hand, and the crowd quieted down a bit. Our first contender tonight comes from the Bronx District. Give a hand to the Axe. A tall, skinny guy came into the ring with piercings and scarifications all over his body. He looked more like a scary punk rocker than a fighter, all dressed in black. I appreciated the aesthetic and the fact that he was the only fighter besides Jenny that wasn't sponsored by Hector. He looked a bit too cocky, though. The president took his fighting stance, as did the Axe, and the MC called them to fight. The fight began a little slow as they danced around each other before they started to throw punches. But soon they were punching and kicking at full speed. The president looked barely winded while the Axe started to fade. That was when the Axe missed a step, and the president landed a hard blow to his jaw with a loud crack, dropping the Axe to the floor. The smaller guy tried to get up, but from the look of his lopsided face, he was definitely in no shape to continue. He's done, said Heather. I agreed. So, apparently, did the MC, who called the fight for the president. The crowd roared as the Axe was carried out of the cage. Peter moved to the side as the cleaners came in and wiped the blood from the floor. When they were done, the MC stepped back into the cage. The next fighter, back from a year-long hiatus, is the Destroyer. More of the crowd cheered this time as another man stepped into the ring, barely fitting through the door of the cage. He was much bigger than the president. This guy looks promising, Heather said. I shook my head. Nah, this guy would be better off on the wrestling or the weightlifting circuit. He's too big, which makes him slow. That proved to be the case. The Destroyer managed to get a gut punch in on sheer physical power, which only made Peter mad. The president kicked him in the balls, grabbing the Destroyer's hair as he doubled over, then put his weight into shoving the Destroyer into the floor. The Destroyer, wisely, stayed down, even when the president kept kicking him until he was dragged out of the ring. The crowd went nuts with cheering and a few boos from the Destroyer's loyal fans. The next fight was with a woman called Big Bertha, who, contrary to the name, was not big at all. She was half the president's size and wearing only a sport bikini and fighting shoes. They danced around each other for a bit, and then she let in on him with a series of well-placed kicks. Come on, President, she said. What's the matter? You don't hit girls? She tried to roundhouse him in the head, but missed, letting him backhand her hard on her way back around. She bounced off the far side of the cage and crumpled to the floor. The president moved in to kick her, but the MC stopped him and called the fight. Of course I hit girls, you stupid bitch, he said, and the crowd laughed. Big Bertha was dragged out of the cage like the others before her. Our next fighter is the champion from Harlem City. Please welcome the River. A tall black woman came into the ring, and I sat forward, intrigued. She almost looked like a dark-skinned version of Jenny, tall, wiry, with a look that said she'd seen the likes of Peter before. As soon as the MC started the fight, she went after the president in full fury, putting him off balance for a moment, pummeling the man and making him stagger back. The crowd went nuts. Come on, River, yelled Heather. Friend of yours? I asked. Yeah, we were roommates for a while when I got here. She was pretty badass in the test fights. She's one of the few who's held out against Peter without too much damage. Almost had him once, but the MC always calls against her. I see, I said, frowning. The president managed to get his hands around the river's throat, choking her until she fell to the floor. He then started kicking her in the head and kidneys. When it felt like it was going on too long, I stood up, but then a piercing whistle came from Hector's box. His security guy motioned to the MC, who nodded and finally called the fight. There was a 10-minute intermission while the cleaners cleaned up the blood again. Heather started to rise. I have to go to her, she said. Heather, from the look of her, there's nothing to go to. How can you watch this and not do something? I stared at her for a full minute. Whatever she saw in my eyes made her sit back down. I leaned closer to her and said quietly, What makes you think I'm not? Oh, she said. Here, have a cookie, I said, blindly grabbing one from the snack table and handing it to her. I took my eyes off Heather and looked back at the MC, who was younger than the pit boss, and definitely made up to be appealing. Dark-haired, light-skinned, and blue-eyed in tight clothes. I made a note to look him up later. He hadn't let the president continue attacking the white fighters so long after they were down, but the river had received no such protection. That kind of blatant racism wasn't unheard of, but it wasn't common either. I thought. Looks like the new Harmonist types haven't all been taken care of, especially since I thought I had found most of them. Oh well, there's always a few that get away. Not for long, though. The MC came back into the ring. Our second-to-last fight is a grudge match of a former champion who's returned to the circuit after the president took his crown. Welcome back to the ring, the Eliminator! The crowd cheered as a black man, the same size as the president, came into the ring, raising his hands to the crowd and taunting the president. Come on, you cracker, let's do this. The MCs started to fight, and they were off. The two were pretty evenly matched, trading blows as much as barbs. He's gonna throw it, Heather said, just as the fighting was starting to become interesting. Oh? Yeah, I heard him talking to the pit boss earlier. Shame, I said. He's not half bad. He's had a lot of medical work done, but all of Hector's money is on Peter. Oh, really? I drawled. I grinned as I watched the Eliminator get knocked out by the president, then kicked a few times for his trouble. Compared to the others, he got off lightly. I followed his progress out of the ring and saw Jenny waiting off to the side. As the Eliminator walked by her, he shook his head. Jenny didn't react. You might want to take some notes, Heather, I said as I stood up and went to the railing. The MC came in after the cleaners. And tonight, courtesy of Anna Yeremayoff, we have some new blood. Let's hear it for vengeance. Jenny walked into the ring with the crowd laughing. Seeing the tall woman in her simple white tank top and gi and bare feet made the crowd laugh. What, does she think she's in some sort of kung fu movie? Shouted someone in the crowd. That kicked off another round of President, President. Peter circled the ring, encouraging the chant with arms raised. Jenny ignored it all as she just stood there, waiting in the pose I remembered from my defense training on Musashi as Shiten no Kame. To anyone else, it looked like she was just standing casually with her hands in front of her. I laughed. Idiot, I said out loud. Idiot? Asked Heather. She's already playing with him, Heather. Watch, I said. Should I fuck this noob up good for you all tonight? Peter yelled, and the crowd went wild again. Jenny bowed to him while the crowd laughed, which confused Peter. He quickly hid it, though, as the MC called for them to start. Peter rushed her head on, winding up his arm for his infamous right hook. Suddenly, Jenny moved, and Peter met with air, knocked off balance. Jenny gave a gentle shove to his shoulder that sent him sprawling onto the floor. The crowd went quiet, not really sure how to react. I looked at Hector across the way, who was staring at me. I gave him one of my brightest smiles. then went back to watching Jenny work. Peter got back up as Jenny resumed her Shinzen no Kamae position. He went into a sloppy boxing stance and rushed at her. This time, Jenny flicked her arm and fist vertically, deflecting the blow, while simultaneously heel-palming the bastard in the face, instantly breaking his nose. I giggled as the blood gushed out of his face. "Holy shit," said Heather, her head swiveling to watch Jenny move. Peter staggered back for a moment, then came after Jenny again, going for her throat. To the crowd, it looked like he almost got her, but then she reached over the top of his hands with her right hand, gripped his right hand, took a zigzag step backwards and to the left, then put him in an arm lock. She lifted up the arm, causing Peter to drop to the floor. In one swift move, she took the back of his locked elbow and pushed. There was a loud pop and his elbow dislocated. "Fucking bitch," Peter yelled. "I'll fucking kill you." She shook her head and let go of him, retreating to the other side of the ring. "Why'd she let go of him?" asked Heather. "Wait for it," I said. Peter stood up slowly, his right arm dangling by his side. The anger on his face was evident even from our box seats. The crowd was now shouting, "Vengeance! Vengeance!" which just made him angrier. He let out a roar, driving after Jenny in a rage and trying to land a punch with his good arm. She almost looked bored as she stepped diagonally to the left, bringing up her right elbow at the last moment. It connected with Peter's face with a sickening crunch, snapping his head back. His body pivoted backwards and his feet lifted off the floor. In a movement so fast it was almost invisible, Jenny pushed his head down hard, making sure he hit the floor skull first as he fell. He didn't get back up. The cleaners dragged the president out of the ring to a waiting gurney. Jenny bowed to him. The MC came over, held up Jenny's hand, and then declared her the new champion as the crowd went insane. It was only then that Jenny cracked a bit of a grin. I cheered just as hard as the rest of the crowd, and Heather looked like she'd seen God. Hector, on the other hand, was looking daggers at me from across the hall. I blew him another kiss. Jenny. Lulu and Heather met me in the warm-up area, where the staff had left me in the champion's cubicle. Heather was giving me a look bordering on awe, which made me uncomfortable, while Lulu just grinned like a feral cat. She handed me my katana and jacket, and I put them on. "Did you really kill him?" Heather asked. I shrugged. "It'd probably be more merciful if I did. If he lives, he might be eating through a straw the rest of his life. He will get his medical covered, right?" I asked Lulu. "I'll make sure of it, since I placed a lot of money on you, and should be getting a pretty hefty payout." She turned as the pit boss came in. "Speaking of which..." The little man looked nervous. Miss Yermath, "Spit it out, man," she said. Well, you're the only one who bet on vengeance, you see. And, well, yes, I believe it was 2,000 to 1, you said?" I raised my eyebrows. "Yes, that's correct, but, we don't have that much on hand." Lulu's face darkened and the man flinched. "I see," she said quietly. "Well, then, I'll make you a deal. You take whatever cash you have on hand and make sure whatever Peter needs medically he gets, and I'll take ownership of this venue." The pit boss opened his mouth, then closed it again. His eyes went wide. "But, Hector..." "Oh, him. Well, you go find the deed and get the money sorted out by tomorrow afternoon, and I'll deal with Hector. Go on now, shoo," she said, literally doing a shooing motion with her hands. He practically ran out of the cubicle. "That was slick," I said. "Well, thanks to you, I can now make sure the rules are very clear and that Hector doesn't shit on his fighters anymore. Or put up any more fighters, for that matter. And with Peter out of commission, possibly permanently, the fights will be much more interesting." She looked around, then tapped her wristchron to summon Roy. "Well, shall we get out of here? I'm ready for a quiet meal in bed." I nodded. I could use a shower and a meal myself, although I'm assuming there will be trouble on the way out. Oh, most definitely, replied Lulu. Heather didn't say anything, just picked up her bag and followed us out to the street. We walked to the parking area where the limos picked up their passengers. Unfortunately, Hector and his goons caught up with us before Roy could navigate the traffic. "You bitch, you paralyzed my best fighter," he said, getting right up in my face. "Oh, I did? Did I?" I said calmly. Lulu shrugged. "And where are you taking Bumblebee? She's mine." Lulu laughed. "Not anymore, darling. She's actually mine, or didn't Carlos tell you?" "Tell me what?" Hector glared at Lulu. Lulu laughed and crossed her arms. "You see, I put all my money on my new bodyguard here. Poor Carlos, he couldn't pay out, so I made him a deal. Put the winnings he could give me towards Peter and his care, and I'll take the deed to the building. I'm sure you'll agree that's a perfectly reasonable solution." "You fucking bitch, you knew your girl would win. Take care of her," he said to his goons, pointing at me. I sighed and stepped in front of Lulu and Heather and pulled my sword halfway out of its sheath. The goons, who I remembered seeing in the fighting hall, stopped and looked at me for a moment. "Do you really want to do that, gentlemen?" I said quietly. They looked at each other, then at Hector, and ran for it. "Get back here, you fucking cowards!" he yelled after them. I stayed in position. "Fuck you, bitch!" Hector said, reaching into his jacket. He pulled out a pulse pistol and pointed it at me. This time I didn't hesitate. I pulled my sword out the rest of the way, cut the gun in half, then cut his hand off at the wrist. Blood gushed from the stump, and he stared at it for a minute before he bellowed wordlessly and grabbed his arm. He went to his knees. "What the fuck?" he yelled as he started sobbing. Lulu came out from behind me and picked up the severed hand. "Nice work, Jenny. Oh, I just love those microblade katanas." I grinned. "Excellent. We should be able to get an ambulance to you pretty quickly, Hector. With such a clean cut, they should be able to reattach it well enough to give you full range of motion afterwards. More or less. Probably." She grabbed him by the collar and lifted him off the ground, smiling at him with a stark grin that didn't reach her eyes. "Now, while my friend here doesn't kill if she can help it, I don't take that attitude. You come after me again, Hector, and I'll pay you a visit. And really, Hector, you don't want me to do that." She turned him towards me. "I think we should help out the medics when they get here. I mean, they're going to rip his clothes anyway, but if they have no clothes to rip, then they'll be able to get him to the hospital faster. If you please, my dear." I took my sword and slid his clothes off carefully. First the suit jacket and shirt from the neck to the end of each arm. I moved to his pants, cutting his belt, then down each side until he was just in his underwear and shoes. A wet spot was blooming on his underwear when I finished. Lulu saw it and tisked. I heard Heather behind me trying not to laugh. By the time I was finished, Roy had pulled up with the limo. He got out and said, "Is there a problem, ma'am?" "No, Roy," said Lulu. "We're just finishing up here. Could you call the EMTs, please? This man will need assistance." Lulu shoved Hector away from her, and he fell to the ground. He looked about to pass out, but his eyes were full of hate for Lulu. I couldn't really blame him, but given all that I'd heard in the warm-up area after Lulu took Heather to the box, I didn't really care. Lulu turned to me and Heather. "Shall we go, then?" she said brightly. I nodded and cleaned my sword with one of the remnants of Hector's coat, very carefully. I had a cleaning kit back at the hotel to get the last of the blood off, although the sword was practically self-cleaning. I sheathed it in one fluid motion and followed Lulu and Heather into the limo. Chapter 7. Marcus. There were footsteps behind me, which meant it was someone who wanted me to know that they were there. I tapped the key to blank my console and turned around. "Oh, hi, John," I said. John Smith smiled. You've definitely been improving, Marcus. I see our training isn't going to waste. Well, it was much better training than I had at UI. Obviously. The other man gave a chuckle. So, have you found anything yet? I frowned. I don't know. The data's old, but there isn't anything obviously wrong, except for some slight oddness in the markets. What do you mean by oddness? John asked. Well, I noticed that there were a bunch of companies, including survey companies, losing value. Not enough to raise red flags publicly, but it's been going on long enough now that it's added up to a fair amount. And there are specific companies, including a few of the oldest colony companies, that have gained more value than they should have and haven't lost value at all. But the types of companies are all over the map. It's not just one sector. It's as if someone is targeting the whole economy. Have you found the source? Not yet. I don't think I can find it from just this data set or from anything else we have inside the library. John took a chair from one of the other desks and sat down next to my desk. Do you think you could possibly find the origin of this oddness? Possibly, but I don't think it's a one-person job, and it's definitely not something that's recently shown up. I mean, it could be someone who's a really clever programmer who's dropped some coding on planets with Unity's wide markets, but it would take a lot of time and money up front to get from planet to planet. And that just seems too obvious anyway. Whoever this is really good and very careful not to do too much. I'd have to go to one of the major colonies and get into the market servers there. That makes sense, John said, then smiled like I had said the right thing. I sighed. You already knew all this, right? Yes, he replied. However, you figured this out in a few hours. It took the AIs a few days. Seriously? I said, surprised. The AIs don't understand money and markets. Neither does anyone else raised in Survey, really. You came from Unity. Money is essential there, and you worked in the banking industry for a number of years before you went to UI. I seem to remember that's part of the reason they recruited you in the first place. I nodded. The New York Colony Bank had me working forensics for the Kozalezi bank hack. It was a cold case by then, and all I found was a dead end. Neiman was the best, really. Even I'd heard about them before you recruited me. I vaguely remember reading that they had actually found the person a couple of years ago when you all sent me dirtside during training. Fleet wouldn't talk to the media about it, even though they had a lot of documents proving it was Kozalezi's own son that did the hack. The rumors then were that they changed genders then disappeared again, which really pissed off the Iron Lady when she found out. So she went after them herself. Admiral Arroyo's, that is. She's not well liked. John gave a snort. The Iron Lady wasn't well liked when she was among the living. I raised my eyebrows. Oh, Hades destroyed her ship when escaping Unity Hub last year with the ambassador. Damn, well, she wasn't the brightest star in the galaxy. Hated anything Survey with a passion. We knew. John grinned. Of course, I said. So, let me guess. This isn't just a nice conversation about some old data, right? Since I am now done with basic training and my enhancements have stabilized, I'm going to assume that you have a job for me. I already knew that the answer would be yes, because John never wasted words. Nothing he ever brings up is random. Yes. I thought for a moment, putting everything together. You want me to go to a Unity colony, get into their computers, and track down whoever is playing the markets. Yes, and you have somewhere specific to send me where there's already another agent in play. John nodded. And I'm to apprehend the person or persons and bring them here. Very good, Marcus. Yes, that's exactly right. We'll need to give you a Unity legend, though, as Survey people are not really all that welcome in Unity spaces these days. Thankfully, we own a lot of commercial ventures in Unity, so you'll be able to have a legend that fits with your knowledge and skills. He dug a tablet out of his jacket pocket. Here's the summary files of the mission from Control. You'll have a week to learn your legend and about Genovian Union Financial, our main financial firm, where you will be a mid-level computer specialist. All your documents and background on the tablet have been added to the Unity systems. Since you and Control have already wiped your old records, and since you hadn't been in UI that long and are considered dead, we won't need to do much in the way of cosmetic work for you. We will change your hair color, however. I nodded, relieved. It's a low risk that I'd be recognized. I don't have much family in Unity anyway, and half of them are retired and aren't leaving Whithaven anytime soon, if ever. I don't know anyone on Geneva either. I didn't do much work outside of Unity Hub and the research facility on Yentai. Besides, UI's got bigger things to worry about than a doppelganger of a dead agent. You're not going to Geneva Colony. I'm not? I asked. I thought I was going to Genovian Union. John shook his head. I'm sending you to meet one of my agents on New York Colony. She's found that there's an unusual flow of information landing in the hands of Paolo Cosolesi that he should not have, including the whereabouts and medical records of his former son. Information, I might add, that the library had scrubbed after Neiman had already done it once. That information only leaked because Cosolesi gave it to the New Harmonist spy, who was in a position to expose Neiman. Control thinks that the information leaks and financial oddities are somehow related. In short, your mission, for the duration, is to figure out if that's true. Figure out who and what's responsible, and shut it down if you can. Huh, I said with a grin. You were right. About what? The work I'm doing for you is so much more interesting than anything I got in UI. Of course it is. John stood up. Hermes will be here in a week to bring you to Geneva Station. Then you'll take Unity transport from there to New York Colony. Geneva Station is the only colony that isn't actively hostile towards Survey right now. That's mostly because they are of Swiss descent, and Survey Intragalactic MC is technically a Swiss conglomerate. Never mind the fact that the Bundesrat of Geneva Colony knows exactly how much business Survey brings in for them. The Director of Security for Genovian Union will meet you at the station. He is also an agent, and being seen with him will help you with your legend. He'll also give you an update of the current market data. Oh, and don't let our agent on New York Colony scare you. As you know, we have many neurodivergent agents. The one you're meeting is a sociopath and prone to being very sexually adventurous and flamboyant. She will, however, respect boundaries and consent. Don't be afraid to tell her no. Okay. She knows I'm coming already? I asked. Yes. John walked towards the door. Good hunting, Marcus. Thank you, sir, I said to his retreating back. 2 weeks later, I was sitting in the best restaurant on Geneva Station with the Director of Security of Genovian Union Financial. He met me in the docking lounge after the demon from Hermes dropped me off. Mr. Roner? The red-headed man asked as I came through the airlock. Yes, that's me, I said. Grüezi. Welcome to Geneva Station. I'm Levi Kuntz, Director of Security for Genovian Union. The man held out his hand. Thank you, Director. It's nice to finally meet you in person. Please, call me Marcus. Likewise, Marcus. Please, call me Levy. The formal greetings over, Levy escorted me to my hotel, then suggested going to dinner to talk about my assignment. I know the best fondue restaurant on the station. You'll regret it if you don't go. Sounds good to me, I said. I've been on a ship for a while, so a real meal would be welcome. After I freshen up, of course. Excellent. I will arrange it and come for you at 1900. You'll need to wear a suit. The restaurant was fancy in a rustic way. The decor mimicked an alpine ski lodge with blonde wood paneling and wall screens that looked like windows overlooking snow-covered mountains. I was surprised when the maitre d' led us to a private dining room that looked like a cozy library and was suitably impressed. We talked about random things while we sipped our beer and waited for the fondue to arrive. Being an actual Swiss person from Earth, I assumed that Levy was going to be really reserved, but it turned out he was rather outgoing and interesting. We warmed up to each other pretty quickly. When the waiter brought out the fondue and sides, Levy thanked them and then pressed the privacy button. The door to the room closed. "Well, my friend," Levy said as he speared a bread cube and dipped it in the melted cheese, "the next Unity cruise you're leaving for New York Colony is in 2 days, which doesn't give me much time to update you on the current situation. Most of it I'll need to give you through your enhancements. You'll have your company risk column tomorrow morning. That will give you access to your spending account, which is, as usual, excessively generous. Since you're traveling as one of my high-level troubleshooters, you'll have access to all of the computers in our New York branch, and the authority to make people get out of your way. Keep an eye on the branch manager, though. He can be a bit of a twat. If you have problems, you can always contact me." He took another sip of his beer. "I apologize for doing business over this wonderful dinner, but with the time constraints, it can't be helped." "That's okay. I understand," I said. "One of the hazards in our line of business." I spared my own cube of bread and dipped it in the pot. When I put the boozy, cheese-covered bread in my mouth, it nearly disintegrated as it hit my tongue. I chewed carefully, swallowed, and shook my head. Oh, damn, it's been a long time since I've had an authentic fondue. Did they put the whole bottle of Kirsch in this? That's the only proper way to have it, Marcus," Levy said with a laugh. We reviewed the mission parameters as we finished off the fondue. It was towards the end, when Levy tried to get some of the last of the cheese out of the pot, that his bread cube fell off the fork. "Scheisse," he said with a laugh. "Isn't there some sort of penalty for losing your bread?" I asked. "Well, the old tradition is that women have to kiss the people sitting next to them, and the men have to buy the next round of drinks. Now you can choose to do either." I was just tipsy enough to respond, "What if you want to do both?" My face grew hotter than the alcohol that was already making it. Levy grinned. "Well, then, I can buy the beer now, and you can collect the kiss later." "Deal," I said. The waiter brought out coffee, but we didn't linger too long over it. On the way back to my hotel, we stole looks at each other as we chatted. As soon as we got to my room, I did, indeed, collect my kiss. You have been listening to Tales from Flat Space. If you want to support me in my writing, there are many ways to do it. Share this podcast, follow me on my Twitch channel, or buy my books. All you have to do is go to revgenapon.net and click on the relevant links. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you next time.